more than a third of professional footballers suffer from depression or anxiety. That's according to the biggest ever study of its kind carried out by the World Players Union, FIFPro. The findings have just been released and also suggest footballers who suffered from serious injuries are up to 4 times more likely to suffer from mental health problems. Today, a conference is being held at Wembley looking at issues around mental health and sport. Clark Carlisle is there, whose problems are well documented, one of the many attending. He said he's currently helping 4 Premier League players who have mental health issues, and there are many more who need help.
It's brilliant and it's horrendous in as much as, you know, when I did the documentary about suicide in football several years back, I was inundated, thousands of emails, not just from players but from members of the public who the story and the issue resonated with. Now, what I'm finding is that I got an email last night from the partner of a player who can see all the signs of depression within a partner. He's a long-term injury sufferer, but he doesn't know what to do about it. He's not acknowledging it. She doesn't know what to do about it, and she doesn't know where to go. So she's come to me for advice and guidance, which is wonderful, but I think the view is that why don't we as a society know how to deal with the issue of mental health and the signs and symptoms when they present themselves? This is where the work needs to be done.
Clark Carlisle. Let's speak to Dr. Vincent Gutterbard, who's the Chief Medical Officer of FIFPro. So how wide did you spread the net in doing your research, Dr. Vincent?
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. Well, you know, as a union, we strive to represent the player properly, and we look after their health, and not only after their physical health, but also after their mental health. And it is relevant during a career in professional football, but also after a career in professional football. So we initiated in 2013 a first pilot study about mental health in professional football, including a quite small group of current and retired players. And because of the large success of this first study, we wanted to conduct a larger study, and it's what we did in the last year.
And is anywhere any better or worse than anywhere else? Are players less stressed, say, in the smaller leagues rather than the Premier League or the Bundesliga or La Liga?
Well, it's difficult to answer this question because our population was not that large that we can make any analysis on a subgroup level. Nevertheless, I think in a higher league, you have different kind of stressors that occur during the career of a professional footballer. In a lower league, you are, of course, exposed to perhaps a less financial possibility, and you have to work perhaps aside. So it's a different life, a different kind exposure to stressor, and all this situation might lead to mental health issue.
But in a way, I've got to say the figures come as no surprise to me. From what I know of footballers and just what I see as a viewer, let alone those I've worked with, it seems to me an absolutely brutal business. And in a way, I'm surprised more don't succumb to mental health illness than do. They must be actually quite resilient in many cases.
Well, I think the meaning of the large public is that a career in professional sport, but of course in professional football, is something that everyone is dreaming about. Nevertheless, when you are within professional sport or professional football, well, you can be confronted with different kind of issues that you are not used to deal with, or you can not cope with properly. And it's true, I think mental health issue is quite underestimated in professional football, and our larger study conducted in the past year is another testimony that shows that mental health issue it's a large problem in professional football, both during and after the career.
Well, I don't know what it was like around the world. You'd know better than me. But traditionally in this country, it always used to be the case. It was a very macho environment and just get your head down and get on with it. But generally in world football, are the medics and the clubs, are they more aware of the issue of mental illness and more equipped to deal with it?
Yeah, I think you see a good shift in the past year. of course, the club are interested in one thing. It's the performance of the player. It's to have a good weekend and to win the next match. So all the work that they have done directed towards the psychological aspect of the player, it's related to the performance of the player. But when you take the player in a long-term perspective with his mental health, I think clubs have been a little bit reluctant to take care about the player, and it's where I believe a player association or union has a huge role to play in order to promote and protect the mental health of the player, not only during their career, but especially on the long term. Once someone is retired from professional football.
Okay, just stay with us, sir, if you can. We can speak to Leon Mackenzie now, who played for Norwich City, suffered from depression. What brought it about with you, Leon? Thanks very much for coming on to talk about this. When did your problem start?
It was quite a long period. I lost my sister at age 23 when I was playing for Peterborough at the time. And I didn't really understand the circumstances and things of depression. It was only until circumstances changed in my life, I started to become quite shut off. And also for the back end of my career, injuries played a big part in my career, and it stopped me from doing something I loved, and I didn't have that control. So when you don't have that control emotionally, it can affect you. And I think that was one of my triggers that sort of fired things off for me.
So I assume initially you were grieving for your sister quite naturally and thought you'd just have to get through it. But you getting any help at that time from the club?
No, I think we're talking quite a while back, 2002, 2003, around them some sort of times. Where things were then, I think as a society we didn't really understand anyway. And to have like sort of the quality of understanding, shall I say now, maybe like the doc said, I'd say for the past sort of year or so, things have definitely pushed on in regards with getting better and the awareness of things and people talking of getting better. But back then, no, there wasn't anything. I think it was for me, it was just, like you say, we're in a society where, come on, let's pick yourself up and brush yourself off. And sometimes that doesn't always work.
And who did you turn to? Who did help you out of it? At
that particular time, I didn't really turn to anyone about that particular time. When I went on to, suffer with myself, and the thing is with depression, it's all down to circumstances. It's in us all. It's just what triggers us, whether that be divorce, whether that be losing a family member, or whatever it is, or like you say with this topic, injuries. Once that kicks in, it can go to a place where it's not too great. And I'm lucky to be here today because obviously I had a situation where I was at Charlton at the time, and I tried to end it all. I tried to take my life, and after that, the repercussions after that was that the next day I actually went in to Charlton and trained and didn't say a word. Like even the doctors that spoke to me after I'd sort of come around just let me go. So maybe there was a little, not great. That wasn't great to probably let me go straight away at that particular time. But I actually went into training the next day. I didn't really say a lot, but things did get even worse after that. And then unfortunately the Gary Speed incident happened, which again was sad and a tragedy. But what alarmed me then at the time was I felt that it took someone of high profile for them people to kind of open their eyes and kind of start listening. But I feel like, there is such a big percentage of sportsmen and people in around the world. It shouldn't take, someone of high profile for us to sort of stand up and start listening. And there's players in the lower leagues. Whether you're in the lower league and you're not earning as much money, it's totally irrelevant. Whether you're a Premiership player or a lower league player. I've played Premiership football. I've played in all the lower leagues. It doesn't really matter. Everyone's circumstances is different to their own lives, and it doesn't really come down to the pressure of money or anything. It comes down to the situation of where you are at that particular time.
And I think the other important message with that came out of the Gary Speed tragedy, it was somebody who didn't noticeably have a particular problem. I mean, you tragically lost your sister and then you were getting repeatedly injured. That didn't apply to Gary. He was very successful as a manager. He looked happy on the outside. One now understands from that you just never know with people. You've got to look very carefully.
That's the sad thing about it. Obviously, we don't really know how example Gary was when he shut his door and shut the curtains. We never really know the deep ins and outs of it. Like you say, on the outside, everything looks good. And if you asked anyone that played with me, you asked anyone that knows me as an individual, you wouldn't really think I was quite a bubbly character and everything else. But you say you do bottle up a lot of things inside, and it can be your downfall in later on. I mean, the stigma attached to mental health problems is some people, it means for some people they can feel uncomfortable, they don't want to talk, and many people just don't feel comfortable about their own feelings. And it's, for me, that's why I try and be a voice, because it is healthy to keep speaking.
Okay, Leon, stay with us if you can. Darren Eady joins us as well. Now, you had a similar story in the sense that it was injuries that really drove you mad, if I can put it like that.
Yeah, it was. It was. I always had injuries throughout my career, and that was one of the things that always came back from it. And I think that's the situation where I always felt there'd always be a way. I've had 26 operations on my knee, one on my neck, and one on my cheekbone. So I'd always been through that and always come back from those injuries. And, to get to the day where you're waking up from an operation, and my wife was already in the recovery room, which is very rare, to then be told literally within hours of that your career's finished. No matter how much you kind of prepare yourself for it, you never really can, and it was a huge shock, and you kind of expected, the care and attention to be given to you and the sympathy, but actually, there wasn't too much. You go into training a few days later because I had to obviously recover from this injury to carry on with my normal life. And I went into training, the lads went out training, all bubbling as normal, passing the ball about, having good fun, and I'm sat in the changing room thinking my career's done. And within days, I'm then, hang your boots up when you finish career. For me, it was the opposite. I took them down, took them home, and never went back. And, from one day to the next of being involved in that environment, to always thinking you're going to be involved with football to play, and to the next day, literally for it to stop completely, was a huge shock. And Leon's right, these things kind of build up over years, and it was an accumulation of 3 or 4 things. And, my mum was diagnosed with breast cancer as well, and all of a sudden it was these kind of things all got on top of them, and you sort of built them up inside and never really talked to anybody. And they just dragged you down. And it's the same for everybody. Nobody's different. We have different triggers. It's the same symptoms for everybody, just different triggers. And that's the important thing to realise. There's no elitist in this. It doesn't pick certain people out. It can happen to anybody at any time.
Well, you two were both playing at the era just before the money got really silly. But a lot of people will be thinking, you earn a fortune, players earn a fortune. What are they moaning about? What is there to be depressed about? Which to me is like saying, okay, you're seriously ill, but you've got lots of money. So what are you moaning about? It
was never about the money. It was always about not being able to play the game anymore. And what to do with the rest of my life. And that was a difficult part. And actually, Leon was the person I went to. He was my kind of, I knew that he'd had similar problems to myself. He's actually the guy I rang and wanted to speak to first of all. I know the PFA kind of offered little bits, but at the time it was literally you ring up reception at the PFA and say, can I speak to someone about depression? You know you're not going to do that. As a footballer, you're not going to do that. You wanted to just speak to someone who kind of understood what I'd been through. And Leon was my go-to man, and he was great. You know, he put me on to Clark Carlisle, who was in charge of the PFA chairman at the time. And he said, you know, we'll get you the help you need. I was then put in touch with the Sport and Chance Clinic with Peter Kay, who unfortunately has taken his life now due to suffering with similar issues. And I got put onto him, and I thought, this is it. I'm finally going to get sorted out. And I remember actually where I was. I was in the Marks and Spencer's in Norwich, and my phone rang. I thought, this is it. I'm actually going to get the help I need. And it was Peter Kay I actually spoke to at the time. And he said, we can't help you. He said, we deal in addictions, you know, alcoholism, drugs, and that type of thing. And there wasn't really the facility at Sport and Chances to offer those type of help at the time. So I went from thinking I'm going to get help to thinking, what am I going to do now? And it kind of progressed from there, really. And it was a really tough time,
Leon, you've taken the easy option and gone into professional boxing, I know. How do they deal with mental issues in that sport?
Again, there's not a lot that is really sort of going on. Again, a lot of boxers, I definitely know that probably do suffer. But where you sort of hear about it and the help that there is provided, maybe it's not so highlighted. But it's definitely something that is definitely can improve in all areas. Me going into it is some days I wake up and I think, oh gosh, like what's going on? I'm 37 and jumping into a professional boxing ring, and at the levels we're hitting now, it's quite a big deal. But you know what? Not everyone can do that. Everyone, you know, one career finishes, and you know the way I look at things and in life, you can go into whatever you want to after one finishes.
Let's speak to Dr. Ralph Rogers, who was a doc at Chelsea 2010 and 2011, medical advisor to the NBA, also worked with cricketers at Warwickshire. Dr. Rogers, how are you?
Good morning. Good morning.
Good. So are we getting better at dealing with this now? What was your experience at Chelsea? Were the medical team there as vigilant as looking as a player's mind as his knees or groin or whatever?
Good morning. I just might not be a good idea to talk about my days at Chelsea. I can talk in general about professional
no, of course,
sport.
General then.
Yeah, and I think we're getting better at it. This study it's a great study, and it highlights how pervasive this condition is. I mean, even for me, I didn't realize it. That almost a third of the players are having these problems: anxiety, depression. We're taught often, you know, during our career in sports medicine that, you know, it's as common in athletes as it is in the general public. But here we find that it's even more prevalent. And I think a lot of the problems, as your guests have stated, is that, you know, there is a stigma. You know, no one wants to be looked at as being weak. And, you know, physical injury, but it's really difficult to assess mental injury, mental health problems, especially when it's very difficult to come out, so to speak. And even some of these conditions are actually misdiagnosed. So studies that have just been done, which are great studies, actually highlights this problem, and we can start to develop coping strategies for our players. We can start putting preventive strategies for players. We start looking at end-of-career things and what players should be looking for, what doctors should be looking for. I know as a physician, we're really keen to look on the mental health during injury, as your guest has spoken. You know, injury, when you take something away from somebody, that is a serious stressor, especially something they love and something as passionate as football.
How about in the NBA, you know, what you understand of American sports? How do they deal with it there? I mean, that's a suitably macho environment. I mean, they're all physically gigantic apart from anything else. They look indestructible.
They absolutely. You know, they have a lot of programs in place in the NBA, in American sports. We seem to be a little bit, and I'm not comparing that we're better than any other country, but there seems to be a little bit more structure in place for this type of thing. Now, I think we're all becoming better at it, but there are programs for athletes to go to, especially for mental health. You know, they're doctor spotted, or if a player knows that they have a mental health problem, they know where they can go for sure.
I suppose illness or injury is a slightly different issue to somebody who's got no apparent reason, inverted commas, to be depressed. You can understand how, particularly a career-threatening injury like Darren had, would lead to that. That's logical. What's more difficult to grasp in when somebody's on top of the world, scoring and everything, but still kind of succumbs to mental illness. Those are the ones you've got to worry about when nobody can understand it. Everyone's baffled by it.
Exactly. I mean, and that's it. Mental health, no one's immune to it. You know, no one's immune to anxiety and depression. It can grab you. There's all kinds of stressors, whether, as one of your guests spoke about, their sister dying or divorce, a problem in a relationship, even losing. You may be scoring, but your team may be losing. That may be a stressor. So there are all kinds of stressors. And the mind is an incredible organ, incredible thing, and we really don't understand completely all the stressors, and that can just from one day to another, you can flip, so to speak.
Okay, Ralph Rogers. Dr. Rogers was Chelsea's club doctor between 2010 and 2011. Extensive experience with the NBA and with cricketers at Warwickshire. Thanks very much to you. Just got a final word from you, Leon. What would your advice be, somebody being in this new, somewhat more enlightened age, but what would you say to them?
Just to speak to your family, the close people around you. Is crucial to keep the close people around you close. Speak to people who you trust, and that will sort of kick you on to try and get into the place where you do need to get that professional help. And everyone works differently, but I know that speaking is definitely the first and foremost thing to do.
Okay, thanks to you, Leon. And Darren, you'd echo that, I assume.
Absolutely. I think it's just being aware of your emotions. I think in football it's highly difficult because it's kind of almost actively encouraged to have a bit of anxiety and a bit of nerves before games. That's what gets you through and plays you at your highest level. But it's when that divide, that line is crossed, and then realising that. I think America does it completely different to us. I think they always look at their psychologists and mind coaches, and so we're a little bit behind, but as Leon said, it's about talking to someone and realising actually when you go over that line, there's plenty of help in football of mind coaches about that winning mentality. But actually, there's not so much about when things go wrong, and that's something that needs to be looked at certainly.
Okay, thanks, Darren. And finally, Dr. Vincent Gutterbaj, whose research this was, that's got us talking about this from FIF Pro. What's the key thing you've taken away, and what would your plea to clubs and the industry generally be?
Well, first of all, our latest research is a confirmation of the pilot study we conducted in 2013, and it acknowledged that a mental health problem is likely to occur both during and after a career in professional football. Of course, with this kind of study, we want to raise the self-awareness of all professional football stakeholders about mental health problem. But most importantly, we want to develop and implement some preventive and supportive measures for the player, either during or after their career. And we also want to be able to identify in an early stage some players that are at risk and more likely to report some mental health problem. So, for instance, knowing that a current player that is suffering from 3 or more severe injury during his career is 3 to 4 times more likely to report mental health problem than a current player that is not suffering from severe injury. It's something that is really useful to us because we can identify those that might be likely to report some mental health problem in the future. But we have a lot of work to do on that topic.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Vincent Gutterbaj, Chief Medical Officer of FIF Pro.